We've been covering a lot about Windows recently, and the biggest reason is that I have gotten sick of what Windows did and how it was forcing stuff on my systems, and that is why I switched to Linux and created this channel to encourage people to switch again. Well, guys, Windows went ahead and did it anyway, and today we are going to discuss. Thanks for coming on back to another Switch to Linux video. Once again, another Windows video. Why? Well, because I switched to Linux because of the shenanigans inside of the Windows systems. And we have seen a lot in the recent months about the recall system. And now that 24H2 is rolling out, some interesting and surprising things have been seen, and I wanted to go ahead and talk about some of those. So if you like this type of content, please feel free to subscribe to the channel. We will give you some basic tips on switching to Linux near the end of the video, so stick around for that. But I do want to highlight two major negative consequences of this 24H2. So let's go ahead and have a look. First, from Windows Central, people that have installed Windows 24H2 update on their system have found that 8.63 gigabytes of files are simply taken up and you can't remove them. We see here from the screenshot down here that inside of Windows Cleanup, you can see 8.63 gigabytes of files here. You can select the button to remove, but it never actually seems to delete those files. What are they? Nobody really knows right now. And so what they said here is people were reporting this, and so they tried it out, and they were actually able to show this very same thing on many of their computers as well. Not everyone, but many of them. So basically, Windows 11 24H2 is gobbling up close to 10 gigabytes of data on your hard drive that are listed as temporary files, but it can't seem to delete them. And that's very curious. What is going on? Is this just reserve space for something, I don't know, like recall maybe? I don't know. Nobody seems to know what's going on, but what we do know right now is that you can't delete the files. They say some debate if the files stuck on the system is due to a bug or not. Windows has allowed to delete these type of files for years or so, so it seems unlikely that would change. Even if there was a change to Windows 11 that resulted in those files having to stay placed, it would be an issue to show them in a storage sense here. Having a sense of 8.63 gigabytes of files that cannot be deleted, only to not be able to delete those files is a poor user experience. And yeah, once again, Windows is getting us a fairly poor user experience. It's curious that even with all the beta testers of things, we haven't seen this. Of course, they've laid off all their huge QA team. But this really isn't the biggest problem inside of this new update. The actual one comes from a report from Chris Titus, actually. And, of course, he's been working on a script that disables or a lot of removes debloats Windows. He's working with one of those as well. And what he has discovered, and other people have completely confirmed, now, Recall was supposed to be, this is that scary spy application you install on your system, and then it will keep a log of everything, taking screenshots of everything in your computer, utilizing OCR and AI to create a database file. Now, this caused some initial issues in that it was completely insecure. And they allegedly fixed many of those, but this is also a feature that was supposed to only be on Copilot Plus PCs with the NPU processor chips. Well, lo and behold, Windows went ahead and did it anyway. Everybody, whether or not you had a Copilot Plus PC, everybody had Recall installed on their system. Now, what Chris Titus actually says in his video is that it is enabled. Now, I'm not sure if he means installed or enabled, and I don't have a Windows computer here capable of running Windows 11 24H2, so I can't test exactly what that is. Let me know in the comments, is it just installed by default, or does he mean it's actually turned on and enabled by default, which Microsoft has said it's not going to do. So first, we have this system that everyone comes out and says, this is a bad idea. They say, okay, well, we will install it, but not enable it by default. But then we had the ability to delete it, but they said, well, that's a bug. And then everyone was in uproar. They said, well, okay, we'll be able to delete recall from your system now. But now what we're actually seeing that this 24H2 has been rolling out, we are seeing it is installing on every system. Now, in the Chris Titus video, he says it is enabled by default. I don't know if that he means it's actually enabled or if it's just installed. I would like to see some clarity from some of the Windows users, so leave us a message in the comment. Was it enabled by default or was it just installed by default? Now, the big problem came from uninstalling it. And it turned out that the recall is now a function or a dependency on the File Explorer, at least the new version of File Explorer. And so anybody removing recall was rolling back to a much older version of the File Explorer, losing a lot of the more modern features. Now, there was a workaround for this, which Chris Titus has released inside of the application, and he discusses it in the video there. And so you can have a look at that if you are still using Windows and you want nothing to do with this recall nonsense. So what they actually say here is, after some back and forth between the original composer, it was found that Recall and Copilot were required to run the new File Explorer. Before you ask, the new one is the one that provides multi-tab functionality. Copilot is an important part of Recall. Now, this was, he says this is not the case in the 23H2 release where Copilot was not integrated. So Copilot is a separate AI function. Apparently now the Copilot and Recall are all embedded inside of the File Explorer, and so trying to remove any of these will result in a much older and reverted version of the File Explorer. And not everybody knows that this recall has been installed on their system on a simple update, because all of the messaging and marketing to this point has demonstrated it's only supposed to be a function on Copilot Plus PCs. So I've even told people, don't worry about, in fact, I've warned people, don't do a Copilot Plus PC because of this application. But now apparently any computer you get that happens to have Windows 11 24H2 is also going to have Recall installed by default, which means a lot of your data could potentially be gobbled up even if you did not intend. Of course, with these updates, they're trying to encrypt everything by default. They're trying to enforce Windows Hello by default, all things required, allegedly again, to get Recall to work. Although, if they're cramming this in on us, it wouldn't surprise me if the recall function is working in any way without the extra security that they promised us. I'm wondering if they didn't just, oh, we're going to do all these extra things just to smooth everything over, and then, screw you anyway, we're just going to go ahead and enable it because we really want all this data inside of the system. We want to have a simple text searchable file of everything you're doing on your computer because that kind of helps us in our agenda of making sure you can't do what you want. Yeah, that's a little conspiracy theory-like, but the reality is we're seeing Windows do this type of stuff, and we've seen Windows doing this type of stuff for a long, long time. And the reality is, this is the thing that got me to switch away from Windows. I was happy and content being a simple web developer using my Adobe products on my Windows 7 computer, and I was doing a good job with that, and I was having clients and all this kind of stuff. But then I started seeing the Windows 10 stuff coming out, and I saw this system that was perpetually connected to the internet and perpetually sending data. I'm like, I do not want any of that. And so I started looking for alternatives. Now, of course, at that time, I first played around with Ubuntu, which I was like, okay, this works and it's competent. I didn't like the overall layout. That was, of course, when Ubuntu was still running Unity as the default desktop environment, which I thought Unity was interesting, but not really my cup of tea. And that is when I found Linux Mint, and Cinnamon was just exactly what I was looking for on every front. And so the reality here is that I'm going to encourage people, if you're sick of the Windows stuff and you have the capabilities to jump ship onto something else, I'm going to encourage you to give a try to Linux Mint. Just use the basic Linux Mint Cinnamon, the one they recommend. And what this is going to look like. Now, again, if you're still unsure, I do not advise you to just wipe out your Windows system and switch cold turkey to Linux. I didn't take that approach. Now, if you can't afford a second computer, you can install Linux onto a separate USB drive, or you can just run it on a live ISO that doesn't save or make any changes to the system as you're using it. You can see what it can do. You can play around with it. You can get comfortable with it. You can play around with the software available for Linux. But if you just head on over to linuxmint.com and click on your download button, and they do have a whole page here on the installation instructions. We have a guide here. If you want to pull it up on a phone, you can go ahead and click on that. So you start by choosing your right edition. Most people, I'm going to say, just try the Linux Mint Cinnamon. They do have Cinnamon, Mate, and XFCE. There is another one called LMDE, which is based on Debian. Of course, I'm just going to say just stick with the basic regular Cinnamon. For most people, this is going to be your best bet. They give you explanations here about which one you want to try. Most people these days will be doing a 64-bit. 32-bit is only the older versions for older computers, but nearly every computer, at least here in America, is 64-bit. Very, very few exceptions. And if you do have a 32-bit computer, there's other options like Linux, MX Linux or Debian can run 32-bit systems as well. But you can go ahead and do that. Hit next, and now you need to verify your ISO. Now, the first steps here is if you're already using Linux Mint, verifying. If you're already on Windows, go down to the very bottom here, and they will have a section. If you are using Windows, there is a good tutorial guide they have on verifying your image there on Windows. So this will send you to some applications where you can download the ability to check. So here they're doing the PowerShell, which is something that is on every Windows system as it is. There's and I've done videos in the past looking at verifying the ISO using I think it's GTK hash. There's a couple applications out there for Windows that will allow you to double check the hash of a system. And if you just follow this guide here, this will do a good job of giving you the instructions that you need. Once you have verified your ISO, you want to install it. If you're on Windows or Mac, you can use Etcher. Just download the Etcher. So make sure you are grabbing this from the correct source. Don't be doing an internet search for Etcher and click the first thing that pops up, which is possibly going to be a malicious ad. This is at etcher.balena.io. Interesting. That domain name might change in the future. .io is actually going away. It's a top level URL. But you can go ahead and download Etcher here, and you can then create the image as they have here. Once you create that onto a USB drive, then you just need to plug your drive into your computer. And as their steps say over here, insert your USB stick into the computer, restart it. Now you might need to go in and make sure that your BIOS can boot to the USB drive, which is fairly simple. You're either going to do escape F1, F2, F8, F10, F11, or F12. Let me simplify this for you. If you're using a Dell computer, it's usually F12. A MSI motherboard, F11. Most of your HPs are either F11 or F9. F9 is actually on the list, but that's one that I've seen with HPs. Usually escape or delete will also get you into your settings. So escape, F2, or delete, one of those three when you boot up the system can get you into that mode as well. So there are ways, of course, if all else fails in Windows, you can go into the advanced startup options and you can tell Windows to reboot the system into the BIOS. That is actually an option that you have. So just go ahead and tell the system to boot off of that drive, and then you will be in a live environment. Now, if you're not intending to install, Just do not click on the install button. Just, you can play around with this as much as you want, but any changes that you make to this distribution are not actually going to be saved. But what you will find is that Linux Mint is a very easy to use system. You're going to find that outside of very specialized applications, you're going to have, if not the application you're already using, like a web browser. Every web browser is available, but you have applications like LibreOffice, which will almost completely replace Microsoft Office for most user cases. There's some cases it won't, but most user cases it will. You have software like GIMP, which can replace Photoshop. Again, not if you're in a professional studio that absolutely requires the latest Adobe stuff. But if that's not you, like, don't use, I don't understand this program as a reason to not use it. Learn. Take the time to learn. Okay, I started this Linux journey not even really 10 years ago. And I am very well fluent in a lot of these different software packages. I didn't know anything about installing a new operating system or playing around with a live key or system virtualization or really FOSS software in general. I didn't know much about any of that type of stuff. But I've learned, and I learned because it was important for me to learn, because I was sick and tired of Windows making decisions for me I did not want to make. So, as Windows continues to make portable decisions, hoist dangerous software on us that we do not want, it is critically important that we look at our other options. Don't be forced into using some system that wants to control you. You take better control back on your system, at least in the areas you are able to, which you can do with an external hard drive, a separate computer, or just wiping Windows off of your system if you know for sure you don't need it. And that way you're going to have a much better system that's going to give you the ability to control your system. You will have freedom once again in your computing, and you'll be free from all of these shenanigans that are constantly trying to tie your system into clouds and other people's servers and things like that. So that is our brief message for today. Let me know your thoughts down below. And also, if you are running a computer that did upgrade to the Windows 11 24H2, let me know, did recall install and did it automatically set itself up, or did you actually have to enable it? I'm really curious about that. Hey guys, here just Tom from the editing deck, as I'm just about to push the video to render. Chris Titus did get back to me on Twitter where I asked him the question. So what he said here on the response is, he said, in 24H2, it is installed and enabled by default using the English US Windows 11 Pro edition directly from Microsoft. He said he had a couple people in the chat. It was enabled in the EU, but it was not enabled in the EU, but some people said it was. So this replies to the Windows 11 Pro. So I haven't seen any information on the Windows 11 Home Edition. So that's kind of curious to see. I thought I'd throw that in there, as I just heard that back right about the time I was about to render the video. So those are our thoughts. So if you got that Home Edition and you have that 24H2, let us know. Did recall install itself? Did recall enable itself by default? Let us know that in the comments. And thanks to Chris Titus as well for getting back to me on Twitter so quickly. So there we go. We'll add this as the end of the video. Thanks for watching. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this. Leave us some more comments down below. And I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.